Do you hear me now?
Yes.
Good. So, hi. My name is Yuriy Tymchuk, and for the last 2.5 years, I bled, sweat, and dreamt about code quality. And this is kind of the time when I want to share my findings with you. For the sake of gratitude, I will start with the same slide I used in the end of my last ASUG presentation last year. And I was looking for a new job, preferably for a continuation of my PhD. And ASUG is really an amazing place. You can ask, and you may get what you're asking for. So now I'm indeed continuing my PhD in Bern, and I want to thank Oskar Nierstras, Stefan Dukas, and Anna Tien for helping out. But now let's get serious. This guy suffered a bad brain meltdown. And you may think, like, what happened? I would say that maybe he made a small mistake. Like, he forgot to put a period in the end of a statement, and then self was sent to a block, raising an exception, and this was in, let's say, code highlighting. So this means that when you get an exception, it's highlighted, and you get exception again, and then you're done. Okay? But we are programmers, right? So we can analyze this code, and we can say, wait, you are sending self to a block, and block doesn't understand self, so maybe you can have a look. And actually sending self to anything is kind of strange. So this is what we do now in Pharo 5. This thing at the bottom is QualityAssistant that I implemented. And essentially it uses small int rules to check your code on the fly and give you feedback so you don't get brain meltdowns. And this is the logo of QualityAssistant. Now, the point is that after last ASUG presentation, we already integrated it into the development version of Pharo. And we thought that, well, actually it's live feedback. So we don't know if it's good for developers or not. And we asked the developers after 2 months, how do you find QualityAssistant? Do you think that it's disturbing, or do you think that it's useful? And we gave a grade of 7 points, and the results were mind-blowing. Only 4% said that it's sometimes disturbing, and 4% said that it's not influential. Other people said that it's useful in some extent, and this is completely amazing, with almost half of people finding it very useful. But this is not everything that is going there, because if you compare this with the critique browser, which was there before QualityAssistant, you ask people like, well, how often do you use critique browser? And it turns out that 9% don't know about critique browser at all. And like quarter of developers uses it daily, another quarter uses it weekly, and now people see critiques all the time, and they like it. So there were other things that happened after QualityAssistant was introduced, and if you want to listen about them, please come to my another talk, which is 15 minutes past 12 in IWST room, just there. But today I am not going to talk exactly about QualityAssistant, because if you think about it, it's just a small piece of UI. There is much more behind it, which is the Renraku framework. And in fact, I want to show you Renraku framework, but the problem is that one does not simply show Renraku, because it's a meta model. I mean, I can show you a spec, a specification of it, but it would be boring. But luckily, I have enough stories accumulated over the time I worked with Quality to just tell you stories, and you will figure out how Renraku is powerful. And let's start with an origin. So the origin of the name. And it comes from a Japanese word, Renraku, which means a connection. And this is kind of significant for me because I was doing karate for a long time. And after you learned all the punches and kicks and movements, you should be able to connect them in any way that your trainer wants you to. And Renraku connects a lot of things. So first of all, we have two basic entities, like a rule and a code. And rule defines some constraints about the code, but there's now one thing connecting them, which is a critique. And critique knows which rule criticized the code, and critique knows which piece of code exactly was criticized. But what's more, critique is an object, so it can do whatever we want. And I will show you this in the future. But before that, another short story about the vocabulary. So, as you have noticed, there is this critique word, which is different from what we were using usually in Pharo, which was a critic, okay? Now, after I wrote 2 papers with a lot of critic words in it, it turned out that this thing stands for a guy who criticizes stuff. It's not the result of criticism, okay? And reviewers get annoyed. So this is wrong. Now we have critique. But this meant that I had to make a big refactoring in my code. For example, Renraku trivial critique had to become trivial critique. And it's not a big deal, right? But I have other people who rely on my code and they use this stuff. So I thought like, well, this should I... And we don't have really tools for deprecating classes, so what should I do? But then, you know, we are creating quality rules. So we created a rule, and now it tells you, look, there is this thing that you are using and it was renamed, so you should use another class. And we also have the autofix button, so you just click on it, and it shows you, okay, I will change this one into that one. And that's it. And if you think about it, it's a really interesting concept. We applied refactoring, and then it refactored our code, but we cannot refactor all the code in the world because we do not own it. But we can ship our code with the rule which helps our clients to refactor it. But it's time for the next story about death and life. QualityAssistant was designed to die. And you may ask, like, why should it die? It's such a nice tool that people like. So let's think what QualityAssistant is. Essentially, it's just a small piece of UI at the bottom of system browser. Also, there are plugins for Inspector and Spotter which are not that successful. But take a look at this. This is an improved message browser in Pharo, which was not done by QualityAssistant. It was done by the message browser itself. Okay, and you have these highlights which shows the critiques that are about this part of code. And when you hover on the icons on the side, you get advanced information, possibility to ban the critique or to auto-fix it or so on. And this is important because the tool developer who develops message browser can do whatever he wants, and he just relies on the Renraku model to obtain critiques. And then he puts them in his tool in the best way possible. Because usually tools do not allow you to nicely plug things there to change the UI, and then we have a crappy support and so on. And I will tell you one more story. So take a look at this. This is a system browser, enhanced a bit by Lozano, Mans, and Kellens. And if you look closely, you can see that there are these red and yellow exclamation marks. So they tried to improve code critics, and they also integrated feedback into the browser. And it was done around 2013. So do you think that it's kind of strange that we already had an integration, but then it was never present in the image? Do you think that it's kind of weird? You kind of agree with that. I will tell you. I will tell you why this didn't happen. Because this was old system browser. And Nautilus was born, so this thing died. And also the integration of critiques. Because, well, this guy did a plugin for that, and Nautilus had a completely different way of plugging stuff. And they were not paid for integrating their tool in whatever there is. And if all the tools relied on one model such as Renraku. So all browsers relied on Renraku, Nautilus relied on Renraku. They could only make critiques available in Renraku, and then they will persist in all the tools that use it. And to support my claim, I will tell you a next story about polycriticism. So at some point of time, I was approached by these two guys by email, and they said, you know, we are linking Fogbugs issues with classes and methods, and maybe we can show this information in QualityAssistant because it's a pain to develop a plugin in Morphic for Nautilus and you already have it. And I said, sure. The only thing that you have to do is to follow a Renraku model. And they followed it. And this is the result. Sadly, this was just a prototype, they never finished that. But think about this. You don't have to deal with UI. They just made their own engine, and then you have it there. You have your own icon for a bug report, which is a bug, so people can understand what it is about. You can put whatever title there is, and they have like specific actions there. So it's available. For example, now you can make your own code coverage engine, or an engine that gets documentation from mailing list. And you can just provide the data in Renraku, and it will work. It's already there in Pharo. It's only waiting for you to make developers' life easier. Besides that, I want to emphasize how important is a feedback loop. So, if you have noticed, in QualityAssistant, there is this helpful question with thumbs up and thumbs down. And you can press it to send us a feedback so we know whether you like the critique or not, whether it's helpful or not. And besides just putting thumbs up or thumbs down, you can write the feedback, like what is happening, why don't you like it? And once I was looking at these feedbacks and I stumbled upon a rule called RB-inst-var in subclasses rule. And there was a comment. I have no idea what this rule does. So I thought, okay, let's check what it does. And indeed, when you look at a class, it tells you instance variables defined in all subclasses. Not really useful, but you can say, okay, maybe it was hard to put a short name, let's check the rationale. And the rationale is not really better. It says like checks classes for instance variables that are defined in all subclasses. So I looked at the rule, what it does, and it checks if you have a same instance variable defined in all subclasses, but not in the superclass. So this is a suggestion that maybe you should pull up the variable into the superclass. So I changed the name. And now it says text, same instance variable defined in all subclasses. And you can see this text in square brackets because now critiques are smart, so they can have hints that exactly text is this variable. And I also updated the rationale. So it says that, okay, you have an instance variable which is defined in all subclasses, and then maybe you should pull it up. And, well, when you pull up an instance variable, how do you do it? Do you manually create a variable and then go into each subclass and delete the variable there? Or there is another functionality? There is a refactoring thing. And critiques are smart, so they can propose you ways to fix the problems. So now you can click the autofix button, and the refactoring is initiated, and you can look, okay, the variable will be removed from this class and added to this class, and you just click once, and it's done. So feedback is really important, because from completely useless rule, we went to a rule which can also help you to fix the problem itself. Time for next story, about how the demand shapes the model. So it all started when we introduced this quality feedback in message browser. Because if you take a look at it, there are some places which are highlighted, which indicate that the critique is there. And for this, we need to know from from where to where we have to highlight. We need this information. And to explain you what is going on with rules, I will tell you that there are three major categories of rules. And they are block rules, parse tree rules, and transformation rules. And block rules are essentially custom programmable rules. So you can program it there whatever you want. You are just given a method or a class and you do with it whatever you want. So theoretically you can obtain this interval and provide it for highlighting. This is what is not interesting us. But then there are this more than half of rules are parse tree rules and transformation rules. And how do they work? They're really nice. So you write something like that. You say, okay, we want to find this piece of code. Smalltalk, UI, icon named a symbol, but the symbol has a backtick before it, which means it can be any symbol which is there. And then when you have a piece of code, it will detect that part, right? And then for transformation rules, you can also specify, okay, we want to change this to put this symbol as icon, and it will run, and it will auto-fix it, and it will become as icon. But think about this. It detects the interval, right? However, none of these rules ever allowed you to provide the interval for the critique. Like none in the old times with critique browser, not with QualityAssistant. And I looked at that, and apparently with parse tree rules, you can hack them around to get that index. To get the main thing that they do, you have to hack around and to rely on what developers are doing. Then I tried to hack around transform rules, and it was not possible, and I went crazy. And at that point I thought like, okay, these things are nice, they worked well, but we have to re-implement them in some way. And now what I also did, I moved down these rules from the level of a method to the level of a node. And because, well, we rely on Renraku, there is an inspector plugin for Renraku. Let's imagine that we have this method. And then we click on AST tab, and then we select one of the nodes where we know there is an error. And then what you see there, when we select tab with critiques, we see a critique about this node. Okay? And then when we click on this critique, it also shows you, okay, look, this is code, and this is highlighted place. So, going back to the result, when we have these three categories of rules, well, for block rules, we rely on the developers. But for parse tree rules and for transformation rules, we get highlights by default. Okay, from going from more than 50% of rules that can never have highlights and intervals, we went to more than 50% of rules that are easy to create and that are giving you intervals by default. And this brings us to the last story, which is the point of no return. So before this, I had to hack a lot around the existing rules. I said, okay, we rely on the refactoring browser rule model, but then we hack around to allow this smart critiques and so on. And after I changed the refactoring rules, the parse tree rules and transformation rules, it was just too much to hack around. So I said, okay, let's just change the tools that use this model. And it was time to change Critique Browser. And this is Critique Browser running on top of Renraku, which still has some bugs, but I'm working on that. But what I want to tell you is the improvements that happened without us changing the actual things. So for example, previously, when you had a rule like a temporary variable which is not read and written, it was relying for highlight. You can see that version is highlighted here. And what happens? It detects the version here. Okay, this variable is not read and written, and then it stores string, and then it looks for substring in the source code. And then it shows you, oh, here's the problem. Except, no, it's not, but it uses substrings. So now we rely on AST, and we highlight in the place where we want to. And it's not like we changed a lot of stuff. We just moved to Renraku model, and then when you ask for interval, it gives you a AST interval. Another thing. So we had the rule which says, okay, you have a method which is defined in all subclasses, but not in the superclass. So probably you need to have at least an abstract method there. And what you saw, well, when you selected number class which has this issue, you saw the source code of the number class. How useful is it? Well, I don't know. You have to somehow magically figure out which method is actually missing there, right? So now, this rule, because of Renraku, because it has smart critique, right? It provides a transformation. This is not super good UI, but at least you can get an idea. Okay, we have number, and as fraction is missing, it will be created when you press the autofix button. There are some places where it is definitely not working. So for example, if you remember this instance variable case, it will just show you that there will be a pull-up instance variable refactoring. But still you can go to the context menu and you can select the automatical resolution and you will get the prompt where you can check what will happen. And there is another interesting part. So when you look at this context menu, the things there come from critique's actions that critique itself provides. And there was one kind of rule which was architectural rule which allowed you to open also a dependency browser. Like if you have a problem with architecture, you can open dependency browser. And it was hard-coded. So critique browser was checking, oh, is this rule? Yes, then add this menu thing. If not, no. And we don't want this. We don't want our tools to rely on the things that may come in the future. Imagine someone will introduce a new critique in the future. What do? Do we like change the code of the, So this is mostly all the code I added. I created a new critique that had one more action called open dependency browser. And you just specify an icon, give a description, and then give an action, which says, okay, open dependency browser on this package. And it appeared there. And what's more, it also appeared in QualityAssistant. So we did not change the tools, we just changed the critiques. And then if you are a developer, you just improve your own child, your critique, and the tools pick it up. And this is what I really like. Now I said that this is a last story, but there is one more about documentation. So I figured out that when I started to work with these rules, I was super annoyed because each time you need to create something, you need to actually read source code of the rules, which is not trivial, and then you need to figure out how the tools use it and so on. So now, in Pharo help browser, you have all the documentation about the Renraku framework. Maybe something is missing, let me know. I will add it. And then there is time for thanks. So first of all, I want to thank my angel integrator, Marcus, who put really a lot of effort of integrating my stuff. And then I also want to thank Nikolai Hess and Hendrik Nergard. I think that Henrik looks a bit different, but this photo is from Slack, so it has to be legend. So these guys actually spend a lot of time either improving my code or reading it. And I also want to thank all other guys who participated, because I know that there are other people who helped. Now, I used this picture at the beginning, and I will also use it now. Because in 1 year, my PhD contract ends. Which means two things. First of all, I will be looking for a new job, so keep that in mind. But more importantly, hop on the quality train while it still has momentum. Because in 1 year, I guess I will not be able to push it forward. Maintain, yes. Push forward, no. And there are a lot of things to do. And so, yeah, let's collaborate. Let's do some things together. There are a lot of things to be done. I like to collaborate. I love to pair program, and back at home we are doing it like that. But if you want, if you want, we can work remotely. It's not mandatory to pair program. But just think about this. there is this tool which has a big impact. It really has a big impact. And there are a lot of places where we can go from that. So one can work on actionability. Okay, we have smart critiques, but how we can bring it further. Another one can work on integrating critiques into Monkey. It's good if we can have Pharo tools that use the same model, but what if there is a web framework which uses the same model? Another thing is better feedback from the critiques themselves. So maybe we need a better UI, or we need to aggregate critiques, or we need to prioritize them. Another thing is code properties, which are not actual critiques. So as I told you previously, well, we can have some code coverage engines plugged in, or we can have documentation engines that mine Stack Overflow or mailing lists plugged in. It's already there, just plug in your engine and we will see how it works. And then one can work on critiques about objects, because it can be done. Imagine you have a meta-shell repository and something happens, and then the repository tells you, oh look, there is a critique because this configuration is not completely right. And speaking about this, how about integrating critiques into debugger? Something happens and it tells you, oh look, check, maybe you made that thing there. And other than that, there is, of course, a full topic on trying to make rules more developer-friendly. So it is easier for developers to create the good rules that help people. And there is a ton of data that I have from usage of the critiques that I have not gotten my hands into yet. And of course, there is this continuous refactoring thing, where you apply refactoring and you create automatically rules to produce the same refactoring on the client side. To wrap up, Renraku doesn't care which tools will use it. Renraku doesn't care which objects will be annotated. And then you can plug in different annotation engines in the runtime. But yet, it connects everything into amazing synergy. Thank you. Are there questions? Yes, please.
It can be that you have a lot of critiques or rules. Can you also switch some off? Like, well, yeah, by solving the problem, of course, but also that you can.
So at the moment, this thing relies on the classic banning through the manifest. So you can ban completely some critique for a class or thing, or I think even for a package, you can say, okay, I have this package, I don't care about these critiques when you check this package. Definitely, that's what I was telling about the better presentation. You can make better ways into showing things. Yeah. Any other questions? Yes, Steph?
Do you have new rules?
Yes, I have them.
Because I think that what is very important is that I would really like to see if that can be approved.
In 7 minutes in IW still.
Okay, good. Because I think that we should really have new rules. The one by default in the critiques were old.
Yes, they are. And in fact, after integrating QualityAssistant, we really got changes to rules, and I will talk about them. But
okay.
no other questions? Good. Thank you.